Hiya folks, and welcome back to the Small Business Toolbox. I'm Andy McClellan and I've been self-employed for pretty much my entire life. And on this channel we just have a little chat about different small business, self-employment kind of things, kind of from a UK orientation, but today's topic probably applies no matter where you are in the world. And today we are chatting about possibly one of the most important things to get right from square one, and that is naming your business. Before we start, I'd like to just welcome you to my new studio room, because this, I think, is the first video in this room. It probably doesn't look much different, but it's been a month of upheaval getting moved into this new space. Hopefully you will see it kind of evolve and grow over time, and I thought it would be interesting to just show you it from the ground up. Anyway, if you're setting up in business, you need to get your business name right. Changing name halfway down the line or in a couple of years' time is an absolute pain in the backside. Trust me, I've been there. I've also worked for companies that have changed their name, and I've also worked for companies that have been acquired and therefore had to change name, and it is a lot of work. To avoid that problem, try and get the name right from square one, because you can't do anything until you've got a business name. You can't set up a business bank account, you can't invoice people, you can't write terms and conditions, you can't do a website, you can't do business cards. You know, everything hinges around getting your business name sorted. So let's dive right in, and I'm going to give you my best tip first, and that is to pick an SEO friendly name. And what do I mean by SEO friendly? Well, think about the thing that your customers are likely to want to search for on Google or their search engine of choice, and try and pick a name that involves the thing that people are likely to search for. Now, this doesn't work for all business types, but it can work very, very well for certain types of businesses. For example, if you run, say, a plumbing business in Newcastle, consider calling your business Newcastle Plumbing Services or something like that, because whenever anyone searches for a plumber, or in fact here, go a step further, call it Newcastle Plumber, because that is the exact thing that people will search for when they go onto Google. Whether or not Google will favour plumber above plumbing, depending on the thing that people are searching for, that is something you need to have a play with, and you can do your own kind of tests. There's a really good tool that you can make use of called Google Trends, and that lets you search for what people are searching for on Google. Very, very handy for working out search terms and whether or not they are search terms that are popular or search terms that just aren't popular at all. Get yourself familiar with Google Trends. You are going to use it all the time. Another example, if you're a physio in Newcastle, consider calling your business Newcastle Physiotherapy, because that is what people will search for. It's not 100% guaranteed you'll come top, but if your business name and your domain name and everything about your business all tie around the same name, these are all things that Google ranks very highly. This approach has worked very well for me in the past for several businesses, and I would highly recommend it. But, and there's a big consideration here, this doesn't work well if you're ever planning on expanding your business out of your geographical area. So for example, if you've called your business Newcastle Plumbing Services and you've decided you're going to expand into other areas, and you've opened an office in Sunderland, trying to sell plumbing services in Sunderland with the business name of Newcastle Plumbing Services ain't going to work. So this brings me on to my second tip. And if the geographic or search engine orientated name doesn't work for you, think about just having a really generic name that sums up what your business does. So for example, if you're a firm of electricians, you could call it like Bright Spark Electrical Services. If you provide financial solutions that are easy to understand, you could call it Simple Financial Solutions. Don't think short term with your name. Think about how you're going to feel about that name in 5 or 10 years' time. The disadvantage of going for a more generic name is that it will be harder to turn that into a brand, because there'll be lots and lots of other businesses out there with very similar names, and you're going to be fighting against all of those. They're not necessarily your competition, but they are certainly your competition on the search engines, and that's probably where you're going to get a lot of your business. But, not all businesses revolve around search engine traffic, and there can be a lot of benefits to building up a really nice generic name or a generic sounding brand that doesn't tie you to a geographic area or even to a specific service. My third tip is to just use your own name. And this works really well for certain industries. So, for example, you might be an artist and you might just want to go by, Andy McClellan Art Services. Or you might run a building services company and you just go by your own personal name and just add the word builder on the end. The good side of it is that you're not going to run into many businesses that have exactly the same name as you. So it's much easier to build it into a brand or a bigger brand, because you're not fighting against lots of other brands with the same or similar names. But there's one very big downside of using your own personal name. And I would say if there's any chance, the tiniest tiny chance that you might want to sell your business at some point, then I personally wouldn't recommend using your own personal name. I would come up with a more generic name for your business, because no one is going to want to buy a business that ties that business to one particular person in that business, because then the business might have limited value when that person isn't there anymore. So that can be a real off-putter for companies looking to acquire businesses. Also, you might find it a lot of work to build it into a bigger brand, and as a result, you're going to have to do a lot more legwork to build your own name into a brand. I'm not saying don't do it, but just carefully consider, again, where are you going to be in 5 to 10 years' time? And is there ever going to be a situation where handing someone a business card with your name on it, or an employee handing a business card to someone with your name on it because you've chosen it as your brand name, is that going to cause a problem? There's a good reason it's called Virgin Airlines and not Richard Branson Airlines. I am absolutely not saying don't develop your own personal brand. Developing your own personal brand is a really important thing. But in terms of a scalable business model, especially a business that you might at one stage want to sell, just give it careful consideration. Also, there's no natural SEO benefits of having your personal name as part of the business name, because no one's going to be searching for it until they already know about the business. So at the point that no one knows about the business, you're going to have a bit of an uphill battle getting that name out there. My fourth tip is just to make up a word. Pick any word you like. You could take two already existing words and join them together, or you can come up with an entirely new word. This can work very, very well if you want to build up a powerful brand name. But the downside is that you've got a lot of work to do to get that brand known in the first place. Again, no one's going to be searching for your business name when they don't know about it, because if it's a made-up word, you're probably going to be the only person who knows it even exists. So it's going to be a lot of initial groundwork to get that business name known. Think about things like Xerox, Kodak, IKEA, Lego, Google, Aldi, Twitter, Facebook. These are all essentially made-up words that have now become so ubiquitous that they are just part of the English language. Massively powerful, but a huge amount of work to build up a made-up word into a big brand. All of this neatly leads on to my next tip when you're thinking of a business name, and that is make sure your business name isn't too long. There's nothing worse than giving someone a business card or trying to tell them your email address or your web address, and for it to be so long they're like, before you get to the end of it, they're like, start that again, what was it? Global Friendly Financial Services Corporation Limited. I would suggest personally, and there's no hard and fast rule for this, but I would say try and keep your business name under 25 characters in total. As I say, not a hard and fast rule, but if you use that as a general guideline, if you're getting beyond 25 characters, I would think about reining it in a bit. If you're well under that, great. The shorter the better, because ultimately this is something that you want to stick in people's heads, and you want your customers to be able to say, oh, go and visit ... .com or whatever, you know. Pick names that are easy to remember, easy to spell, and just generally not too much of a mouthful. As I say, think about your email address, depending on what email address you're going to give yourself. I've already got a surname that's quite a mouthful, so if I'm saying, oh yeah, just email me andy.mcclellan@Global Friendly Financial Services Corporation Limited, no one's going to remember that ever. Make life easy from the ground up. So once you've taken all of that into consideration, I would suggest you come up with 5 to 10 business names that you're happy with. Don't just set, unless you're just picking a name that revolves around your own personal name, then I would suggest you come up with 5 to 10 names that you have in a kind of short list, because trust me, when we got onto the next bit, you're going to quickly rule out a lot of them. Okay, so you've got your short list of 5 or 10 names. You've now got quite a lot of homework to do. First thing to check, does that business already exist? And there's loads of ways you can check that. The first and most obvious thing is just do a quick search on Google and see if any businesses in the area or in the country come up that have a similar or exactly the same name. It should be relatively straightforward. Remember, when you're on Google, if you put the search term in quote marks, it'll search for that exact term and nothing else. The other thing you can do in the UK is do a search on Companies House. Now, even if you're not planning on setting up a limited company and you're just going to be self-employed as a sole trader, it's still worth checking that there isn't already a limited company out there with exactly the same name as you. Because again, what happens if you want to turn into a limited company later down the line and someone's already got the name? You could run into problems where they had the name first and they could be forcing you to change your business name. You don't want to end up in that situation. Try to pick a name that someone isn't already using. The next thing to check is domain name availability. You're going to want a domain name, for example, newcastleplumbingservices.com or newcastleplumbingservices.co.uk. We'll maybe chat about that in a bit more detail in a future video, but if you're never planning on branching out of the UK, there's nothing wrong with just going for a .co.uk or just a .uk domain name. But if there's any chance that you're going to want to go global with your brand and your business, and if you're wanting to sell abroad, I would definitely go for a .com domain name. There are hundreds of different options for the domain suffix these days, like .info, .biz, but .com is still the market leader by a country mile, and I would always suggest if you can grab the .com, do it. Even if you're just a local business, I would still suggest grabbing the .com version of your name, because you never know where things will go later down the line. At the end of the day, it's going to cost you about a tenner a year for the domain name. Personally, I would suggest you keep it and hang on to it just in case. Prime example of that is my Gosforth Handyman business. That started off as gosforthhandyman.co.uk. It's developing now into a much more global service, and I switched everything over to gosforthhandyman.com. Luckily, I bought the .com at the same time that I bought the .co.uk, and I've now switched everything over to using the .com domain instead. So when you're picking a domain name, avoid putting hyphens and bits of punctuation in the name just to make it unique. You do get domain squatters who just sit on domains and they have no plans on ever using them other than to sell them. Sometimes you can pick the names up quite cheaply. Sometimes it's just not worth it. Just pick a different business name. But certainly don't try and get around it by just putting hyphens in, stuff like that. It will plague your life for the rest of time. Just go for whatever your business name is. .co.uk or .com or whatever, wherever you are in the world. That's my personal view on it. And as I say, if there's any chance that you're going to want to start building things into a more global brand, get the .com version. The last thing to try and get is your social media account sorted out. You need to think of every type of social media that your business might make use of, and you want to try and make sure that the vanity URL isn't already taken. The vanity URL is something like facebook.com/Newcastle Plumbing Services or instagram.com/Newcastle Plumbing Services. You don't want to pick a name where someone has already grabbed the vanity URL, because they can be really, really difficult to get hold of. If it's on a platform that you're never planning on using, then okay, maybe it doesn't bother you. For example, maybe someone's already got youtube.com/Newcastle Plumbing Services, but you have no intention of ever using YouTube for your business, it probably won't affect you that much. But if there's any chance that you want to go on YouTube, and I would say every business should have some presence on YouTube, then forget it. Pick a different business name. I would personally say the major platforms you need to check whether or not the vanity URL has already been taken are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Make sure it's free on those 4 platforms. And by the way, this doesn't even guarantee that you can get a vanity address on these sites. With a lot of these sites, you have to build up a certain number of followers and things before you can even get a vanity URL. But at least if you know someone hasn't already taken it from day one, you're not going to be fighting a losing battle. And potentially, if they've already built a brand around that name, again, they could be forcing you to change your business name. Tread carefully in that arena. We'll probably talk about things like trademarks on another video, but I would certainly consider trademarking your name and brand if you can do that. But that's too big a topic to discuss today. So that's it. Once you've picked your name, you've got 5 things to do immediately. Reserve all of your domain names and set up accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube to grab your vanity URLs if you can, before someone else does. And I would suggest you do all of those things on the same day. There are unfortunately unscrupulous people out there who look for new domains being created, and then as soon as that's created, they'll try and grab all of the vanity URLs for that domain and try and sell you them. Don't ever go down that path. If that happens, write off that business name, pick a different business name. At the end of the day, domain names are cheap. Even if you don't end up using it, you could just let it expire in a year's time, but grab the domain names and vanity URLs before someone else does. I would also, as a side note to all of this, suggest setting up a Gmail account for your business. You would probably do that as part of your YouTube account anyway, but it's always handy to have whatever your business name is at gmail.com. There are many services that Google offer that you might want to make use of later down the line, and having that vanity email address, even though you might not use that as your main business email address, and I would suggest that you don't, use a business email address that is part of your main business domain name, like sales@newcastleplumbingservices.com or whatever. But having that Gmail address there, just in case, is very useful for a lot of different services that Google offer. One other little side note in all of this: do be careful that you don't pick a domain name if it's made of multiple words, where when you join the words together and you see it as part of the domain name, it spells a rude word, because that will plague you for the rest of your life. Also remember, on the company's house side of things in the UK, you can reserve the limited company address. You will end up having to file dormant accounts every year, but there are ways and means of reserving a company name just in case you turn into a limited company later down the line. Because what you don't want to do is build up all of your brand and business name and you've done all your homework, and then in a couple of years' time someone else grabs the limited company name. I'll include links in the description below to everything that we've talked about in this video. Best of luck on your self-employment journey. You won't regret it. You won't have time to regret it. I hope you manage to find the business name that you're after. Don't forget to hit subscribe on this channel, because there's going to be loads more business tips coming your way to help you on this small business journey of yours. Thanks again for watching. I shall see you next time. Bye bye.